Hello and welcome to episode number 9 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and oh man, do we have an episode and a half for you today. Before we get started, please follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, and more. We're going to get into Dylan Larkin's new contract. Spoiler alert, he absolutely, positively deserved it. What the status of Henrik Zetterberg is, he was second on the team last season with 56 points, but a back issue might untimely end this future Hall of Famer's career. We're also going to get into the Red Wings prospect system and see who might be up to the challenge of replacing Zetterberg in the lineup. Will the Red Wings make the playoffs this season? I mean, probably not. Have you looked at the roster? But what kind of moves should they make if they, hypothetically, wanted to make a push for the playoffs? We're also going to be talking about the terrible top 20 defenseman list NHL Network put out this week. I mean, you put in Torrey Krug, but you don't put in Marc-Edouard Vlasic. I mean, can we get it together here? Marc-Edouard Vlasic, I'm going to spoil it for you, is an Olympian who's not the flashiest player in the world. He only put up 32 points last season. Torrey Krug put up more than 50. You know, Krug is a power play dynamic quarterback. That's great. But I mean, you can't put Krug on there and leave Vlasic out. That should be illegal. That probably is illegal in some states. I mean, you can't do that. That's terrible. Terrible. Come on. Chel Squared, as is noted in the show synopsis, is dedicated to breaking down the latest news, rumors, and just the right amount of hot takes around the NHL. The knowledgeable guest I have on this week's show is Tony Wolak, who has been covering the Red Wings for the Hockey Writer for over 3 years now. Tony, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the Red Wings, you got Dylan Larkin's new contract at $6.1 million. This is obviously a great deal. He's signed until 2023. He's only 22 years old. He's only going to get better, and he's already put up career highs, 63 points last season, surpassing his second best year by 18 points. I mean, this guy is only going to get better from here. What do you think about the Larkin deal, and what does this mean for the Red Wings going forward?
Yeah, so when the news broke of the Larkin deal, I first was a little surprised with the term. It's a 5-year deal, which means that when the contract ends, Larkin is an unrestricted free agent at the end of that season. And, you know, typically for a player his age, they're signed to a bridge deal, 2 or 3 years, much like Anthony Mantha and Andreas Athanasiou this offseason. But Larkin and the Red Wings took a separate approach, following in the footsteps of David Pastrnak and Nathan MacKinnon, signing a longer-term contract that will pay him, what he's worth, even if it means becoming an unrestricted free agent at the end of the deal. As the face of the franchise now, he's worth it. And the Red Wings, the negotiations took a little bit of time this summer to hammer out what exactly was best for both sides. And, all in all, fans should be happy with this deal. $6.1 million is just a shade over Henrik Zetterberg, what he makes for his AAV. He's the highest paid player on the Red Wings now. He's the face of the franchise, and he absolutely deserves it. He's the right person to lead the Red Wings through this rebuild.
The Red Wings, by the way, have $0 in cap space this season. 0, according to Cap Friendly. The only team in the NHL with 0 cap space, which is kind of interesting to look at the dynamic of the AAV shape-up of the roster. Dylan Larkin, $6.1 million, as you said earlier, leads the team in money per year. 6.1, no one tops that, and yet this team doesn't have $1 to spend for this season. Zetterberg, as you said, makes $6,083,000. That's an interesting number. Franz Nielsen makes 5.25 for the next 4 years or so. I mean, you have a lot of these guys who don't necessarily make top dollar, but at the same time, you have these guys who make probably more than they should. I mean, Franz Nielsen at 34 making 5.25 for the next 4 years. I don't know about that. I mean, Johan Franzen at 38 is on the IR. I mean, I you know better than I do, but I just am not sure that Franzen's ever going to play again. He is making just under $4 million for the next 2 seasons. I mean, how did the Red Wings get out of this cap situation? Because they're in a crunch right now. Is there a way out? Do they wait it out? Do they try to move some contracts at the deadline maybe? What's the best way to get out of this jam, do you think?
Well, I'll start with Franzen. He is not going to be playing for the Red Wings ever again. He's going to spend the last 2 years of his contract on injured reserve. He's been dealing with a nasty bout of post-concussion syndrome, seeing specialists about that. So wishing him all the best, obviously.
Absolutely.
And as for the other players, there are definitely some bloated contracts on their payroll. Yeah, like you mentioned, Nielsen is one of them. Darren Helm's up there. Justin Abdelkader as well. And
Mike
the funny
Green
thing about,
also. I don't know why they re-signed Mike Green. He's 32. They're going to pay him $5.375 for the next 2 seasons. For what? I mean, I'm not sure, but that's I don't get that contract for Detroit.
Yeah, the note that came out of Detroit for that contract and Thomas Vanek's contract this summer was that Ken Holland wanted to surround the Red Wings' younger players with veteran leadership. And at the time, on July 1st, that sounded kind of strange just because, they have quite a few veteran leaders on their team. They have Zetterberg, they have Kronwall, they have Jonathan Eriksson, and Franz Nielsen as well. But now it's starting to make a little bit more sense with Zetterberg's back issue and how that's putting his career in jeopardy. Maybe, Holland knew at that time that it was looking a little bleak, and while he wouldn't tip his hand or make any assumptions, full out for Zetterberg, that may have gone into the decision making when re-signing Green and bringing Thomas Vanek back. And one other note on the cap space of $0. Oddly, it's below zero. On cap friendly, they have 14 forwards and 6 defensemen and 2 goalies. That's the 20 players they suit up for every game. There are up to 3 scratches as part of the roster. So not included on the list is Michael Rasmussen, who is more than likely going to be playing with the Red Wings next season after spending the last few years in juniors. Philip Zadina may make the team as well. They're going to add another defenseman from the AHL, possibly Joe Hicketts or Philip Hronik. So that, as it stands, even with Franzen on IR, that number is going to be below zero. And the only way out of that is either to put Zetterberg on long-term injured reserve if he in fact cannot play, or Ken Holland's going to have to make a move or two before the season starts to become compliant with the salary cap upper limit.
For Dylan Larkin, I mean, the $6.1 million sounds like a steal for the Red Wings right now if he keeps this up, which I'm assuming he will. Do you think he's going to get even better? I think he will because, again, he's only 22. He hasn't yet hit his ceiling, and yet he's putting up 60-plus points on a team that, I mean, they have some scores. Obviously, Zetterberg helped Larkin along the way last season, but with Zetterberg gone, I mean, I still don't see Larkin taking a dip in point production. Maybe with Zadina or with somebody, or with Svechnikov maybe on his wing, Larkin could put up 60 plus, maybe even 70 plus next year. Do you think Larkin hits 70, or do you think he stays at that 60? Maybe do you think he dips a little bit, goes to 50 without Zetterberg?
It all depends on who he's surrounded with. Last season, he did not play very much with Zetterberg, save the power play from time to time. So that was mostly his production. And on top of that, most of that came at even strength. He had only 11 special teams points, 8 on the power play, 3 shorthanded. So that means 52 points at even strength, which is pretty good. He had more even strength points than everyone, but Zetterberg had points altogether.
Right.
So that's always pretty impressive. But it'll be interesting to see Zadina on his wing, whether it's this season or next season. The Red Wings are obviously going to try to surround him as the face of the franchise with some quality talent. And right now, Anthony Mantha will probably play on his wing, maybe Nyquist, maybe Athanasiou. I would say 65 points is probably the ceiling for next season. He may take a step back if he's pushed into a number one center role, because that's, he'll have to adapt to that going up against the Crosbys, the Backstroms, the Matthews or Tavares, whoever Toronto is number one center is next season. But 65, 70 points would not be out of the question, but you don't want to put too much pressure on the kid right away.
And I mean, the report from NBC Sports is, of course, Henrik Zetterberg out for who knows with his back issue, potentially ending the Hall of Famer's career. What does that mean for the Red Wings, both on the ice and in the locker room? I mean, obviously Henrik Zetterberg is a Hall of Famer. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame in the next few years, whenever he officially, quote unquote, retires from hockey. Clearly, first ballot, he's deserved it. He's getting up there in age. He's 37, but he was second on the team last year with 56 points. Obviously, he still has some left in the tank, but his back is a problem. His health is an issue. If he doesn't come back, what does that mean for the Detroit Red Wings?
Zetterberg is a savvy player. He has his game has changed a lot since he was younger. Before he didn't shy away from contact very much. He's not the biggest player, but he was able to, work along the boards and behind the net and take the contact and still be able to muscle his way to the net and, combine with Datsuk to put up, upwards of 70 points a season, which was fantastic for the Red Wings, of course. As of late, he's really changed his game. He almost reminds me a little bit of Igor Larionov a little bit when he used to play for the Red Wings. He's a lot smarter now that he's a little slower and not as strong as he was before. He's still one of the best along the boards at protecting the puck, but you can tell how much he's gutting it out, with his back, especially in the second half of last season. So, what does that mean for the Red Wings? That it means that more than anything, Franz Nielsen's going to be pushed into the top six after spending last year on a third line checking role with Justin Abdelkader and Darren Helm. He's going to be relied upon a little bit more for his offense. Not too long ago, he put up over 50 points with the Islanders. So the Red Wings are hoping there's still something there. He'll be pushed into a top six role and help mentor the Rasmussens and Zadinas as well. Darren Helm will probably slide back to the middle for that third line spot, possibly with Thomas Vanek on his wing. But yeah, the main thing that I'm curious about is the locker room, just because the Red Wings, they valued veteran leadership for so long. It's been, a key component of their success over the past, almost 3 decades, save the past 2 years, of course. So I'm really curious to see how that's tested if Henrik Zetterberg, cannot play. If he can't play, then how will the Red Wings respond, and how will that compare with expectations? Did bringing back Green and Thomas Vanek, did that contribute to the Red Wings, doing better or worse than expected? If they do a great job, does Holland and Blashill, do they attribute that to having the veterans in the locker room, or do they see that as the kids really taking over the team and running with it, and maybe they don't put as much stock into the veteran leadership qualitative metric as they did previously? So it's more so just it's a test for the organization. It's something they've relied upon for so long, and it's really going to be put to the test this year if Zetterberg can't play.
What are the expectations for the Red Wings this season? I mean, looking at their roster, I don't see a playoff run. I mean, I don't think they are going to be much better than they were a year ago. I mean, they mustered up 73 points last season, 30 wins, 39 losses, 13 overtime or shootout losses. They were fourth last in the East. Only Buffalo, Ottawa, and Montreal were worse. Detroit might just stay at 73. I mean, I don't see a 20-25 point jump for the Red Wings with this current lineup that they have to make the playoffs. I mean, even let's say hypothetically they were pushing for the playoffs, they would have to add somebody or something to go on this run, which, I mean, again, one would be ill-sighted. I mean, if you want to be a buyer at the deadline, you have to sell your future. And the Red Wings, at this point in time, I don't see any situation in which they do that. But let's say they do want to push for the playoffs this season for whatever reason. Which position do you think would need to be fixed the most? Because looking at their roster right now, I mean, their blue line is not that good. You have Mike Green and Jonathan Ericsson top two, according to dailyfaceoff.com. Again, this is not, what I think the roster is going to be, but this is according to Daily Faceoff. Trevor Daley, Danny DeKeyser as the top four, and Nicholas Kronwall and Hronek as the top six. I mean, that is not a good blue line. And Jimmy Howard is getting up there in age too. He's 34. Last year of his deal, so he has something to prove. I do think his stats are going to be a little better this year because this is his contract year. He has to show not only the Wings, but the entire league that, hey, I can still play at a high level. I'm here to stay for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I can still do this. So I expect Jimmy Howard to have a solid year. But with that blue line, I don't see the Red Wings going anywhere. But let's say they were to push for the playoffs for whatever reason, if before they look at anything else, they have to add at least 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 defensemen.
Yeah, on defense, they are not up to par with the rest of the Eastern Conference, and that's definitely an area of play where they're going to need an upgrade if they're going to make an impact in the playoffs. But that's more than likely not going to happen. The goal of the organization is to push for the playoffs, to show the younger players what a winning culture is like, so that can aid their development and they can become better over time. There's also the school of thought that the Red Wings should tank and try to get John Hughes in next year's NHL draft. That's just not what the organization does, though. They're a proud organization. They're about winning and don't want to fail into success. And, that's just not what Ken Holland preaches. That's not what Jeff Blashill preaches. They're not going to go out there and, not play their hardest, or purposely sit players who, would help on a nightly basis so they can, lose and have a better shot at the number 1 overall pick. That's just not what they do. They're not going to pull what Toronto did when they were trying to get Austin Matthews a few years back. Ceiling, they make a run for the 8th seed, one of the 2 wild cards in the playoffs. But is that going to happen? More than likely not. Like I said before, the defense could definitely use an upgrade if they're going to be, winning more. Goaltending should be strong, as we mentioned. Howard is in his contract year, and for the first half of last season, he was actually playing really well. By the end of the year, he definitely looked a little shell-shocked in net with all the pucks thrown at him throughout the season, especially with Peter Mrazek and Jared Coro playing horribly last season. But this year he'll have Jonathan Bernier as his backup, and both of them should be splitting time pretty evenly. Blashill going with the hot hand. And I think they'll be good complements for each other. They're both in their early to mid-30s. Neither of them can start 70 games in a season. They're always going to be fresh when playing, and I think they're going to feed off of each other in a healthy goalie tandem, a little bit of a competition. But both will have the right mindset coming into the season about, this is my job to lose, and if I play well, I'll keep playing. Up front, I think the Red Wings, even if they don't have Zetterberg back this season, I do think their offense will be a little better this season, maybe marginally better, but it'll be better this season. Thomas Vanek's going to be a great addition. He scored, 56 points last season between Vancouver and Columbus. Rasmussen should be a great player. He had a nice tournament for Team Canada this summer. Philip Zadina, He'll more than likely make the team if Zetterberg is held out. Otherwise, it's just a numbers thing, and he'll be better off playing top minutes in the AHL instead. But overall, the Red Wings do have some firepower on offense. Mantha's, coming into his own as a quality power forward in the NHL. There's Larkin. Gustav Nyquist is in a contract year, and will be looking for a big payday, which will more than likely be his last big payday as an NHL player. Andreas Athanasiou is still developing, and could potentially reach 25 goals this year, 50 points maybe. Tyler Bertuzzi, of course, he came on at the second half of last season. There's definitely some young talent there. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And now they have Jeff Blashill and Dan Bilesma as a new hire guiding them. And it's entirely possible that their offense is decent, but what's holding them back is their team defense.
Of all the prospects that the Wings now have, who do you think is the most likely to make the team? I mean, you have Zadina, you have Rasmussen, you have Dennis Cholowski, who the Red Wings got in the first round of 2016, Svechnikov, obviously. Which names are most likely to be on the roster list for the opening night game for the Red Wings, do you think?
So I would say Michael Rasmussen, just because if he does not make the Red Wings, he has to go back to junior and play in the WHL for another season. He has nothing left to prove there. He put up video game numbers in their playoffs last year. I think it was 30-some points in 14 games, which is absurd.
Right.
Apart from him, I would say probably Joe Hickett's on defense as the 6th or 7th guy. Smaller player. Red Wings fans love his feistiness, and he can run the power play too. So there would be a little spark from the blue line on what's normally a pretty dry group. Apart from those two, it really comes down to if Zetterberg returns or if he's held out. Zadina will probably make the team. If it's not Hicketts, it'll probably be Filip Hronek. Those are the main players who are under consideration for a roster spot next year. But who knows? Once training camp rolls around, maybe a Cholowski, maybe David Pope, maybe Libor Sulak. One of those players may come out of nowhere as a dark horse candidate to make the team and really impress them and force the Red Wings to keep him on the roster.
Let's say the Wings don't make the playoffs, but they also don't get the first overall pick and they don't get Jack Hughes. What's the game plan, in your opinion, for the Red Wings in years 2, 3, 4, 5 down the road? Because they do have a lot of young guns that can play well. But do you think that's enough? Do you think that they should make a move for somebody like Buffalo did with Jeff Skinner? What do you think is the move for the Red Wings? Do they just stand pat and let their young talent develop, or do they see that their plethora of young talent is an asset to them and they move one of the extra names out to somewhere to get maybe a top 4 defenseman right now? Maybe not. I mean, not now, as in, the August of 2018 right now, but down the road, maybe next offseason. Do they move some name that they just can't fit into the roster, who is 21, maybe, 20, 21, 22, who can play in the NHL, but they just don't have the room for? Do you think that they move one or two of those guys out, maybe get a top 4 defenseman, maybe get a goaltending prospect? Because, as it is right now, obviously, as you mentioned, Howard is in his mid-30s, Bernier in his mid-30s. They don't have a top-caliber goaltending prospect. So what if, hypothetically, they move a young forward or a young defenseman for a young goaltender because they need help in that department?
Yeah, so let's say flash forward to the 2019 trade deadline. They're in the same spot as they were this past season. Still technically in the hunt, but more than likely not going to make the playoffs. They'll probably look to unload a few players again, like they did this past season with Thomas Tatar and attempting to move Mike Green. Nyquist is in the last year of his contract, so he's a prime candidate to be moved for a quality draft pick. Same can be said about Vanek if he's willing to waive his no trade clause, which, if he's going to get a shot with a contender, he more than likely will. Trevor Daley's no trade clause expires a little over a week prior to the 2019 trade deadline, so he may be a nice trade candidate. Nick Jensen as well. So the Red Wings could be sellers again at the trade deadline. They're going to, unless they tear up the NHL somehow, they're probably going to be moving a few of these players out for draft picks and prospects. Now, the strategy at the draft is always the best player available. I'd say their main concern right now would be to find a defenseman in the first 10 picks of next year's draft. Right now, they have some quality prospects, but just not a go-to top pairing defenseman. Yeah, and those don't grow on trees. But with Cholowski, Hronek, Jared McIsaac, Gustav Lindstrom, those are all good prospects. But top pairing, maybe not. On offense, they have a little bit more firepower. Mantha, Larkin, Athanasiou, they're all still young, and 5 years down the road, none of them are going to even hit 30 yet. There's Zadina. Jonathan Berggren was a great pickup in the early part of the second round. Joe Veleno, of course, could develop into a great top six forward. On offense, they're definitely going to have the talent there. Obviously wouldn't hurt to have an amazing top six player, fall into their lap at the draft or through free agency. But right now, I guess the main concern moving forward is improving their defensive depth and, possibly adding another goaltending prospect, one who may be able to start in a year or two, since none of their prospects are close to NHL ready. Maybe looking at someone like John Gillies out in Calgary or Thatcher Demko over in Vancouver. They, those kind of players, if the Red Wings possibly swapped Gustav Nyquist for one of them, that would be great for their organizational depth, because their top goalie prospects right now, Phil Larson, Keith Petruzzelli, Caden Fulcher, they're all going to need at least, I guess Fulcher would be the closest to being NHL ready, but Larson and Petruzzelli are freshmen and sophomores in college respectively, and they're going to need a few more years of college, a few years of AHL experience before they're even considered for a starting job with the Red Wings. So there needs to be a stopgap solution there at some point. But that's up to Ken Holland to figure out over the next 2 years.
Well, if Vancouver gives up Thatcher Demko, you might as well sell the team. Their goaltending situation, they don't have goaltending at all. Their goaltending situation is currently just 2 AHL caliber goaltenders. They don't have anybody in in net to stop the puck. If they give up their best their best goaltending prospect by a mile and a half, Thatcher Demko, the Red Wings love to make savvy moves. They have made some very questionable moves in the past few years, but Ken Holland is Ken Holland. At the end of the day, Ken Holland will find a way to get a gem, to find a way to get a prospect in return for maybe questionable value. But at the end of the day, I mean, if Thatcher Demko gets traded to any team at all, I think we have to not only sell the Canucks, but that entire team needs to be dismantled top to bottom. You can't feasibly trade Demko to any team without at least, I don't even know what you would get for Demko in return. I mean, right now their goaltending situation is Jacob Markstrom and Anders Nielsen. I mean, what are they planning to win with that team? With those two goaltenders in net? Nothing. At best, Markstrom is a backup goaltender. At best, at his very best. I mean, Nielsen isn't much, but they're both just not NHL caliber goaltenders. So if Vancouver somehow manages to find a way to trade their only hope in the crease, not only do they have to sell the team, they have to they have to downgrade to the AHL. I mean, there's there's no other way to put it. You can't trade your best goaltending prospect by a marathon, by 26 miles, and then call it a good trade. I mean, if you trade Demko for Larson and not Larson for Dylan Larkin and 15 first round picks, that's a good trade, sure. But in most cases, one, that's never going to happen. But two, like, Demko is so crucial to the Canucks that if there's no way to give up. Even with the disaster of a front office that they have, I mean, there's no way they trade Demko. But the Red Wings do need to find a way to bolster their goaltending prospects. As you said, their best prospects right now are just getting started in college. They have a long ways to go. As we know, goaltenders take a long time to develop, because if you rush them, they will falter, and you'll ruin, one, their confidence, and two, their fundamentals. Goaltenders need that time, that extra year, that extra game in the minor leagues, in college, in juniors, to really, really hone their fundamentals. And if you rush them, they can't get their fundamentals as solid as they would like them to be, and then they give up the first bad goal, which leads to the second bad goal, and now it's in their head that they're not as good as they would like to be, or that they should be, and then it's a snowball effect from there. So the goaltending situation, as you said, in Detroit, their best prospects are a few years away, and Howard's 34. Bernier's 30. Bernier is not going to be a starter. He never was. He was for snippets of his career, but for the most part, Bernier's been a backup, and they don't have they're not grooming goalie number 3 right now. So as it stands right now, they need a goalie prospect, a prospect they don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Their goalie prospects, Larson and Petrozelli, they're both quality netminders, but like we said, it's just going to take some time for them to reach the NHL level, and that's nothing on them. That's just the way goalies are developed. How long did it take Carey Price to reach his potential? It took years, and going back to the start of his career, he was the franchise goalie, the prospect that they couldn't wait to start, but he couldn't hold on to the job when Yaroslav Halak was competing with them. So that's a prime example of just the way goalies develop over time. He, became one of the best goalies in the league, but not until his late 20s. It took some time, and that's just that's why teams and fans need to be patient with these prospects, and in the meantime accumulate as much goalie depth as possible, because you never know how they're going to develop over time.
You're absolutely right. It's one of those things where Montreal really comes to mind in terms of rushing goaltenders. I don't know what happened to Charlie Lindgren. I don't think anyone knows what happened to Charlie Lindgren and Zach Fucale, but Zach Fucale, I remember a couple of years back, was the name in the crease. He was supposedly the next guy up. He was the prospect to have, and he was highly touted and all that, but Fucale since then hasn't done a whole lot. Lindgren is 24 right now. His numbers in the AHL last season, his save percentage was below 900. These young goalies, I can't stress this enough. Goaltenders in hockey, goaltenders need as much time as you can afford to give them in order to be that elite goaltender. As you said, Carey Price in the beginning lost his job to Jaro Halak. Goaltenders just need that extra game, that extra second to really, really strengthen whatever loose ends they might have in that game. If you put them in a situation where they need to succeed or else, and they're not ready for it, not only are they just going to fall apart on the ice, they're going to fall apart mentally as well.
Yeah, and the mental side is a tough aspect of it. I grew up playing goalie, throughout juniors and in college as well. It's tough. One of my favorite lines to remember from a coach I once had was, goalies can't win games, they can only lose them. So there's always a lot riding on goalies' shoulders,
unless you're Carey Price or Henrik Lundqvist, then you can single-handedly. Because Henrik Lundqvist has single-handedly won at least 100+ games for the Rangers. Some of the teams that the Rangers have made the playoffs with would have been fighting for dead last if it wasn't for Henrik Lundqvist. I mean, he's by far one of the only goaltenders to single-handedly win games. I mean, you could say that for most goaltenders, but for Carey Price and especially for Henrik Lundqvist, I mean, without those guys in net, I mean, the Habs wouldn't be where they were. And the Rangers for sure wouldn't have made the playoffs for a lot of the years that they were on the edge there, teetering, on the edge of the 9 dead last area. Rangers made the playoffs only because of Lundqvist. So I totally get what you mean, but there are just one or two or three goaltenders in the entire world that have the ability to win games. But you're absolutely right. I mean, for the most part, it's up to the team and it's up to the goaltender to hold down the fort. Goaltenders like Lundqvist and like Price can stop 40 shots a game. I don't know how they do it. They're they're in a world all their own. But you're absolutely right. For the most part, a goalie just needs to stop the pucks that they're expected to stop, and that one extra save that pushes momentum towards that team. If they, especially if it's a stoppable puck, or if it's like in a tie game, or if the team is down one and they just need that stop, and if the goaltender provides it, that team, turns around and goes on, on an odd man rush and they score, or whatever. But if they don't make that save, well, that's demoralizing for not only the team, for the goaltender as well. So you're absolutely right on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that great piece that came out in the Players Tribune this week. Yeah. Ben Meisner from American International. I used to train with his one of his goalie partners up there, Jake Anderson, and I can definitely. I don't want to say I can really, because I'm not in his shoes and I'm not experiencing the anxiety and depression that he was, but I understand where he's coming from, in the sense that, there's so much riding on a goalie's shoulders, especially when they're expected to perform night in, night out, and, maintain their job. It's a little easier for forwards and defensemen, where there are, 12 and 6 respectively in the lineup each night. But if you're the goalie, you're out there for 60 minutes, you're expected to stop all the pucks or most of the pucks that come at you, and when one goes in, it can really mess with your self-confidence. But definitely, if you haven't read that article on the Players Tribune, give it a read. It's titled "I'm Not Connor McDavid." Great article, and definitely, I'm team mental health awareness over here as well, and definitely applaud him for telling his story, and hoping, in hopes that there are other people who can relate to it, who seek the help that he did and got himself to a better place.
Mental health, obviously, in everybody is very important. But in hockey, the goaltending position is a lot of what goes into being a goaltender is mental. A lot of it is having the mentality of, I can stop this, I can do this, I can do that. And if you second guess yourself even for a second, that's when your entire game, not only for the next period, not for the next game, but until you fix, what you're second thinking, what you're not, what you assume you're not capable of doing, until you change that mindset, it is a downward spiral for a goaltender's performance. The mentality of a goaltender, obviously the mentality of a forward and defenseman are very important as well, but a goaltender's mindset going into a game, during a game, after a game, having a short memory after you give up a goal, maybe that you shouldn't have given up, or one that was unstoppable and you give up. You have to have that short memory. And if you dwell on giving up that goal just for a second too long, you give up the next goal. And then it's all downhill from there until you kind of, stabilize yourself both mentally and physically. More than anything else, obviously, you can't be a goalie if you're not physically talented. There's no other way to no other way to put it. But the mental state of a goaltender before, during, and after a game is so crucial to the performance on the ice. It's probably an aspect of the game that just isn't talked about as much as it should be, because we all see the stats. We all see this goalie is stopping this many pucks and his save percentage is this, but the physical aspect of the game for a goaltender comes after the mental aspect of the game. If you think you can stop everything, chances are physically, you'll make that miraculous save. You'll reach out with a stick and somehow manage to stop that incredible, shot that should have went in. It's a wide open net, and you've seen that save a few times throughout the season. But if you're second guessing yourself, next thing you know, that stick isn't being you're not reaching over, you're not making that extra step, you're not you're just not in a position where you should be, and then you go up the next goal and then it all goes downhill from there. So the mental stability of a goaltender is so crucial to the game, and it just isn't being talked enough. And that article is so important because it kind of sheds a light on that and more about what it takes to be a goaltender, and obviously mental health awareness as well. It's so crucial, and people just aren't talking about it as much, or if they are, they're not giving it enough credit.
Yeah, I think it was Glenn Hall when he was playing back in the day. He used to throw up before every game, and that's what put him in the right mental state to go out and be a Hall of Fame goalie every night. Another great remedy for that is having good defense in front of you, right. Obviously. There's nothing more exciting for a goalie and reaffirming when you're a little bit down on yourself is, seeing your defense in front of you just play admirably, and what you wanting to repay their efforts out there by coming up big for them as well. And having a great defense will certainly cut down on all the high quality chances that come in on a goalie.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of top defensemen in the NHL for a second, if we can go on a little bit of a lighter subject, NHL Network's top 20 defensemen list that came out is a disgrace. Can we get it together? I mean, NHL Network has ruined top 20 centers, as we talked about last week on the show. Now they've ruined top 20 defensemen. I mean, the fan vote was worse. Leafs fans somehow voted Roman Polak. I mean, they're troll votes, clearly, but they somehow got Roman Polak to be number 19 in the top 20 fan vote list, which is that's a can of worms right there. Roman Polak, obviously they're troll votes that shouldn't be taken seriously. Somehow they got enough of them to make the list. But that's, I mean, you can't do them like that, man. You just can't do them like that. But if you put in Torrey Krug in a list of the top 20 defensemen in the NHL, but yet you don't include Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who played for Team Canada in the Olympics. I mean, Team Canada, by the way, if you don't know, is a stacked hockey team. To play for that team means what? That you are an elite player, and you are one of the best players in that position in the NHL and the world. So Vlasic has played for those teams. Therefore, what does that mean? Vlasic is, by definition, one of the best defensemen in the league. Now, the only questionable team was Team USA in the World Cup last season. Was it last season? Was it, I don't remember.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. That team was a disgrace. That team was a mess. But we're talking strictly Olympics here. I mean, to make Team Canada's Olympic team and play, I mean, you're one of the best players in that position, bar none. And for Vlasic to not make this list, Torrey Krug, by the way, number 16, Victor Hedman, rightfully number 1, Drew Doughty, number 2, I don't agree with that. Erik Karlsson should be number 2. He's number 3 on this list. Erik Karlsson should be 2, maybe 1. I mean, we can have a very intelligent conversation about who's better, Hedman or Karlsson, and we can debate that, for hours, for sure. Brent Burns at 4. I mean, I'm not sure about that. Brent Burns, this list was very offensively, like, heavily minded. A lot of these top guys put up a lot of points, and obviously, for a defenseman, if you put up a lot of points, that means you're in a position where, 1, you're not defending your own zone, and 2, you're in a position where you have the puck in the offensive zone and you're making plays and you're scoring, right? But a defenseman also needs to be judged on their defensive ability. That's what a defenseman is. So to put Brent Burns, who was a forward at one point, for many years in Minnesota and also in San Jose for a little bit, to put him number 4 on this list, I mean, I just don't think I agree with that. I mean, obviously Brent Burns is a phenomenal scorer. He's obviously transitioned to the blue line well, because if he didn't, then he wouldn't be, 1, playing as a defenseman, and 2, wouldn't be on this list. But I just don't know if Brent Burns is a top 4 defenseman in the league. I just don't know about that. PK Subban number 5. I mean, yeah, it's PK Subban. Which, by the way, I think this is really hilarious. Shea Weber is not on this list, rightfully not on this list. I mean, he's injured. He's not playing. He's also, getting up there in age as well. PK, that trade was a disgrace, was an abomination, as we said many times, as everyone said multiple times. I mean, that trade was terrible. But PK Subban, top high defenseman. I mean, yeah. I can't disagree with that for sure. Seth Jones at 6, which I find a little bit interesting. Roman Josi at 7. John Carlson at 8. I mean, he's very good at what he does. Don't get me wrong, and I want to make this clear that John Carlson is very good at what he does. However, he's a power play quarterback. And if you take him off the power play, he doesn't have nearly the amount of points that he does, that he currently does. So, as offensively minded as this list is, if you discount the special teams points that Carlson had, I don't think he's a top 10 defense. I mean, he's very good. Again, I want to stress that. I think John Carlson's very good, but I don't think he's a top 8 defenseman. Above Pietrangelo, above an OEL, above these guys who are better. OEL, by the way, number 15, if he played for Toronto, he'd be a top 5 defenseman on this list, purely because he played for Toronto. I mean, Arizona is Arizona, we all know that, but to put OEL number 15, probably only because you don't watch him enough, is a joke. He's a top 10 defenseman. You can maybe make a case for top 7, top 6. I mean, to put him number 15 is a joke. John Klingberg at 10. Dustin Byfuglien at 11. I mean, again, he's one of those players who was a forward, transitioned back to defense, who will demolish anybody. He is a human wrecking ball. But I just don't know that at this point, because this list is top 20 defensemen right now, at this point, if Byfuglien has the wheels to be a top 20 defenseman, he's obviously, still good at defense, he's still good at offense, very good at both categories, but I just don't know if he has the speed necessary to compete with the Crosbys, with the McDavids of the NHL. I mean, time will tell. I think this season's very important to Dustin Byfuglien's career. We've seen Byfuglien perform well throughout his career, but I think this year is very important not, less so stat-wise, but more of his physical ability. We all know he can hit. We all know he can crush anybody. But in terms of pure defensive ability, I think this year is very crucial for Buffalo because, his speed is still there, but not quite as prevalent as it should be. Zach Werenski, interesting pick number 12. Chris Letang at 13. I mean, listen. Chris Letang, before the injuries, was a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. No question. But with all the injuries, with everything that's been going on with him, with his health, is he really a top 20 defenseman right now? Right now in the middle of August of 2018? Is he really a top 20 defenseman? I mean, if he proves me wrong this season, and wins the Norris, then I will go back on my point that I'm making on the show today and say Chris Letang proved me wrong. But as of now, with all the concussions, with everything that's been going on, is Chris Letang a top 20 defenseman? Probably not. I mean, he's probably, he's close. He's still Chris Letang, but top 20 right now? I don't know about that. Ryan Suter at 14, again, as I said, OEL number 15, yikes. Torrey Krug at 16, yikes. Go Spare, number 17, Changasa Spare. Dougie Hamilton, number 18, interesting. Charlie McAvoy, number 19, and Ryan Ellis, number 20. I saw a lot of Flyers fans angry that Provorov didn't make the list, and I kind of have to agree with that. I mean, if you're going to put Torrey Krug on this list, if you're going to put, Charlie McAvoy on the list, you're going to put, Chris Letang on the list, you got to put Provorov in there. I mean, did you watch him play at all? Did you watch how dominant he was on the blue line with the puck, without the puck, 200 feet up and down the ice? I mean, Provorov is a monster. So if you're going to put McAvoy on there, if you're going to put Letang on there, you also have to put Provorov on there. This was a lengthy response, but I do want to get to what you think. I mean, what do you think about the list? What are your thoughts?
It's all about the qualifier, right? Is it best offensive defenseman, best defensive defenseman? Because of the vagueness of what qualifies a player to land on this list is what's generating all the buzz about, why is this player ranked 14th versus second? Obviously from a purely offensive standpoint, the top three, I guess top five really are the right players, just maybe changing up the order a little bit. You have to consider, maybe defensive play may not be factored as much into this as the offensive contributions. There's the belief that if you're constantly on offense, that makes you a good defenseman because the other players don't have the puck. That may be true, but they're still going to have the puck at least 40% of the time, so you get to be able to defend well. Right. My personal opinion was it was easier 10 years ago when Nick Lidstrom was the obvious answer as the number one player on this list, right, because he was the best in the offensive zone and in the defensive zone, hands down. But that's just not the case anymore. My own personal opinion, I'm a huge fan of how Drew Doughty plays. Got to see him live a couple of times, and he is a beast in both ends of the ice, and he's right up there with Karlsson for top defenseman. Victor Hedman, I think, is a fantastic defenseman in his own zone. Has a heavy shot from the point and, can contribute in his own right. Is he number one? I don't know. I think it's between Doughty and Karlsson, in my opinion, but I think those three are still the top three, regardless of how you look at it. I was surprised to see Torrey Krug on the list as well. Surprised to see Charlie McAvoy on there so early. I know he's going to be a stud defender one day. I just didn't think he'd be there just yet on the top 20 list. Vlasic definitely deserves some consideration for his defensive prowess. Also was surprised to see Jake Muzzin not in consideration, also out in LA. Absolutely. Was a little surprised to see John Klingberg so high. I guess that's just the way they evaluated defensemen this year, maybe a little bit geared more towards offense. When you think about it, Klingberg is a lot of offense and okay at defense, whereas Vlasic is okay at offense but great at defense. So, they're the people who are doing this ranking definitely put more stock into offense. But yeah, it's how you qualify what a defenseman is.
It's the understatement of the year, honestly. I mean, I'm honestly surprised they didn't just go to NHL.com and list the top defenseman with the most points and then just make that the top 20 list with the way that this list is looking like. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and one thing we do over at the Hockey Writers at the end of each season, we hand out awards, for various things. We specifically have a Best Defenseman award and a Best Defensive Defenseman award. Just to distinguish between the two. It's only fair,
Right.
it's because you're going to have the Mark Edward Vlasics of the world who aren't going to be getting enough credit for their play in their own zone, but then you're going to have Erik Karlsson putting up a point per game as the best defenseman in the league. It's apples and oranges pretty much.
I think there's going to be there has to be an implementation of a new award in the NHL soon, because you can't just give the award to whoever, whichever defenseman scores 60 plus points, 65 plus points. You can't just do that. I think there's going to be an implementation of maybe a Lidstrom award, maybe. Whereas, you have the Norris for top offensive defenseman, and then you have a Lidstrom award for top defensive defenseman. Or something. I mean, obviously Lidstrom had offensive capabilities. He was very good at offense as well. But I mean, just as a name, just a hypothetical name for, and Lidstrom also deserves a trophy named after him. So you could name it the Lidstrom Trophy. I mean, who knows, right? But or the Orr Trophy, whatever you want to name it. I think there has to be a second trophy for best defensive defenseman, because with the way that the NHL has given out the Norris to whoever is very offensive on top of, I think they've started valuing offense more so than defense. Obviously defense is still important, but you don't see Vlasic winning the Norris. Like you're not going to see Vlasic win the Norris because he's not a super flashy player with the puck. He's not going to score you 70 plus points every season. He's not going to do that. But yet, he's so good at defense, he is a Canadian Olympian. So there has to be, I think, a second trophy given out to defensemen every year, because this can't go on for much longer. You can't just sort by points and then just award the trophy to whoever scored the most points or the second most points or whatever. You have to judge by both. And if the NHL continues, and NHL Network and and all these and the industry as a whole, if you just continue looking at offensive production more and more, then you're neglecting the defensive side of the game as well.
Yeah, and for our end of season awards that we have, the top defensive defenseman they're awarded the Rod Langway Trophy or award. He was the Minister of Defense for the Capitals, and was purely a defensive, like a shutdown defenseman. Wasn't a flashy goal scorer, and he would be great for the defensive defenseman award. And it is something that needs to be handed out. The NHL hands out the Selke Trophy each year to the top defensive forward. Why not the top defensive defenseman as well? And while we're at it, the Lidstrom Trophy would be perfect to be implemented in place of the Norris, just because he was the perfect two-way defenseman. He was great in his own zone, and he was great in the offensive zone as well. And ever since he retired, the Red Wings have been looking for someone just like him or close to, and they have not come up with anyone yet.
Well, Nick Lidstrom, you can't. Nick Lidstrom is tough to find.
Absolutely.
There's Nick Lidstrom. It was not only a generational player, but kind of like a once in a lifetime player. Just how good Nick Lidstrom. I mean, that whole team, that whole Detroit generation of the 90s, of the 2000s even. I mean, like, that team was so good for so long. I mean, as we know, the Red Wings had the longest running playoff. They made the playoffs, I think 25 years in a row before they didn't make it. prior to last season. I mean, they were that good for a reason, and Lidstrom for almost all of that time was one of the biggest reasons why they were so good. I mean, Nick Lidstrom is not only a generational player, but probably a multi-generational player. He's so good, and it's tough for me to even find an adjective to describe Nick Lidstrom. I mean, he was almost flawless every game, and his career spanned decades because he was so good for so long that he didn't need to retire. I mean, obviously health was a big reason for that, but Nick Lidstrom is a multi-generational player, and it's almost impossible to replace him. Kind of like the Carey Prices, the Lundqvists of the world, the Ovechkins of the world, the Crosbys. These are players that are so good at what they do that replacing them or finding, their successor is almost impossible.
Yeah, they called him the perfect human in Detroit for a reason. Spot on defenseman in his own zone, capable of running the power play and dictating play in the offensive zone. And on top of that, he was he still is a decent human being.
Right.
A great role model for the guys in the locker room and great ambassador for the game as well. And, you're seeing a little bit of that in Erik Karlsson now. I'm not sure his defensive zone play, while it is great, I don't think it's up to Lidstrom's par yet, but talk about a class act for everything that he went through last season in such a trying season for Ottawa, and to only have a positive attitude with everything life threw at him. Bravo to him for not only being the best defenseman, but for being a fantastic guy on top of that.
Tony, I mean, this has been a show, and I sincerely thank you for coming on. I mean, the Red Wings, you cover them, you watch them 82 games, every second, every puck drop, every game, and for you to come on really means a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking about the Red Wings and goalies and top defensemen with you, and looking forward to the season starting.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't wait. It's the middle of August, man. This October needs to get here soon as possible. I mean, the training camp and preseason's around the corner, but I mean, you need the opening night. The opening night chills, the team introductions, all of that. I need that in my life, man. I need it now. This middle of August, nonsense. I need it. I need hockey in my life, and I need it now. I can't wait. This season's gonna be a treat to watch, and the Wings. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but if even if some of these young guys make the team, then you will be treated with a dynamic team, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And you know what? They're rebuilding right now, and while they may not be winning every game or most games, or maybe only winning a few games, they're still going to be fun to watch. And there's a lot of young talent on the team that's going to be there for some time. And just to see them grow over time is going to be a treat for Red Wings fans.
Absolutely. And as always, Tony, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. That was Tony Wolak, who's been covering the Red Wings for the Hockey Writer for over 3 years, one of the most tenured writers at the Hockey Writer for the Wings. And as always, please make sure to like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. Every time you like and subscribe to the podcast, a puppy gets a hug and a treat from its owner. I don't make the rules, just spreading knowledge. I didn't put the pen to paper, but I'm just reading it aloud to you. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Andrew Chel. Thank you again to Tony Wolak for coming on this week, and I will talk to you again in the next episode next Thursday.